She was left alone at the altar, and as the murmurs of the guests grew louder, the CEO of her company, a billionaire architect, slowly approached, leaned in, and whispered, "Play along. I'm going to pretend to be the groom. You've waited long enough for that idiot anyway. Cue the music. I'd bet everything I have that the coward ran away." Avery fought the urge to flee right then and there, her fingers gripping the half-open doors of the ballroom. Through the suppressed laughter of the crowd gathered in the venue, her uncle's booming voice drifted over. Every whisper from the 200 guests gathered in the grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria felt as clear and sharp as if they were screaming directly into her ear. "Poor thing, how is she going to survive this humiliation?" an unrecognizable female voice replied. Her dad poured so much money into the reception, the floral arrangements, the orchestra. I guess the groom didn't even have the guts to show up. Muffled laughter, another chuckle, and then another. The entire hall seemed to vibrate with a barely concealed morbid curiosity and voyeurism. Avery closed her eyes and tried to breathe, but the corset of her wedding dress was crushing her lungs. Every inhale was agonizing. With each passing second, she felt herself sinking deeper into an abyss, clueless about how to escape. "Did you see that jerk this morning?" someone whispered loudly, adopting the sensational, dramatic tone people use when devouring fresh gossip. Someone posted it on their Instagram story. "He was at JFK Terminal 4 departures. The guy literally fled the country. Rumor has it he took off to Cabo with his frat buddies as a joke. Look at this photo on my phone." The murmurs quickly swelled into a wave of nervous giggles, feigned gasps of shock, and increasingly ruthless commentary. Avery felt her legs trembling beneath the crushing weight of several yards of French lace. The bouquet of white roses slipped from her grasp, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Her best friend Zoe quickly bent down to pick it up. "Avery, don't listen to them. These people are trash," Zoe muttered, desperately gripping Avery's arm. "Let's cancel everything right now. I'll tell the guests there was a medical emergency." "A medical emergency?" Avery's voice was so cracked it was barely intelligible. "What kind of medical emergency explains the groom disappearing hours before the wedding? They all know what happened, Zoe. Every single one of them knows." And it was true. People's smartphones were already lighting up with screenshots, videos, and private messages. A hashtag like #NYC Wedding Disaster 2026 was probably already trending on X. By tomorrow, everyone Avery knew, from her college alumni to long-forgotten Facebook acquaintances, would hear a twisted version of how Avery Parker got dumped at her own wedding. "Look at this," her aunt's sharp voice sliced through the air like a rusty knife. "The bride is hiding in there like a cornered mouse. Someone needs to step up and announce that this wedding is off. Let my brother get some of his money back and send everyone home." "Don't be so heartless," another voice replied, though it lacked conviction. "Imagine how devastated poor Avery must be." "Sure, that's true, but what are we supposed to do? Sit here all afternoon hoping for a miracle?" The groom ran away. "This circus is over." Circus. The word slammed into Avery's mind like a hammer. That was exactly what they all thought. This was nothing more than a spectacle, a juicy piece of gossip to dissect at the next Thanksgiving dinner. Remember when Avery Parker got stood up at the altar like an idiot? Laughter, more laughter, and she would forever be branded as the woman who wasn't charming enough to keep her fiancé from running. "Avery, your dad is heading this way," Zoe warned, her eyes going wide, "and he looks like he's about to explode." Her father, George Parker, was charging across the ballroom like a wounded bull, shoving chairs aside and pushing past people. His face was flushed crimson, the veins in his neck bulging, and his fists were clenched so tight his knuckles were stark white. Avery knew that look. It was the look he had when her younger brother totaled the family car. The look he had when he found out his business partner had embezzled funds. It was the face of a man whose pride had just been mercilessly trampled in front of the whole world. "Where is that bastard?" he roared as he approached Avery. "Where did he go? I'm going to kill him. I'll tear him to pieces. Dad, please," Avery whispered, but her voice was swallowed by the commotion. $500,000, her dad yelled, waving his smartphone at the crowd. "I poured $500,000 into this wedding, and that cowardly piece of trash ran off to Cabo to get drunk with his buddies. He's bragging about it on Instagram. Paso. My daughter is standing here waiting for him, and he's bragging about running away." The entire hall erupted. It was no longer just whispers. There were shouts, gasps, and a sudden flurry of movement as smartphones were raised high, everyone trying to record, photograph, and document every agonizing second of the worst, most humiliating moment of Avery's 28 years of life. Her mother ran over from the other side of the room, her mascara smudged, leaving deep, dark tear tracks down her cheeks. My poor baby, my sweet girl Diane, sobbed, pulling Avery into a hug so tight she almost knocked her over. How could he do this to you? How Mom let go of me? Avery mumbled, struggling to pull away. But her mother's grip was like a vice. Mom, please let me go. I'm going to sue him, George shouted furiously punching a number into his phone. I'll throw him in jail, I'll make him spit out every last cent, I'll make him regret the day he was born. George, calm down. One of her uncles tried to intervene, but it was useless. Calm down, calm down. That punk just made a fool out of my daughter and our entire family in front of my partners and my clients, and you want me to calm down. Excuse me. The voice cut through the chaos as sharp and precise as a scalpel. Everyone turned their heads. A tall, broadly built man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit was striding down the center aisle with a steady, commanding gait. His very presence exuded a natural, effortless authority, as if the air in the room was physically parting to make way for him. The guests instinctively stepped aside. Avery wiped her tears with the back of her hand, looked up, and felt the world come to a screeching halt. Sebastian Pierce, her boss and the most sought-after architect in New York City, was walking straight into the epicenter of the most humiliating disaster of her life. Mr. Pierce. Avery stammered, another wave of mortification crashing over her. I'm so sorry. You shouldn't have to see this. But Sebastian didn't stop. He reached the makeshift altar, turned to face the crowd, and spoke in the deep, resonant voice Avery had heard 1,000 times in boardroom meetings. But there was a tone to it she had never heard before, firm, protective, and absolutely lethal. I sincerely apologize for being late, he declared, his face a mask of cool composure as he surveyed the guests. The traffic on the FDR Drive was horrendous. A 3-car pileup blocked all the lanes. But I am here now. A perfect, stunned silence followed. Avery blinked in utter confusion. Late, what on earth was he talking about? Sebastian closed the distance between them in 2 long strides and turned to her. Leaning in so that only she could hear, he delivered his next words in an intense whisper that sent a shiver down her spine. Play along. I'm going to pretend to be the groom. Avery opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Moving with an easy familiarity, Sebastian took her left hand in his and firmly intertwined their fingers. His dark eyes scanned her with the exact same intense focus he used when analyzing the minutiae of an architectural blueprint. Trust me, he added, his voice so low it barely ruffled the air between them. Or let me do this for you. Choose. Avery's world narrowed down to this single moment, and his 2 eyes, which contained none of the pity, mockery, or morbid curiosity she had seen in everyone else, only a fierce determination, and something else she couldn't quite decipher. Mr. Pierce, you can't do this, Avery muttered, painfully aware that 200 pairs of eyes were glued to them. This is insane. You can't just... I can and I will. So decide right now. Do you want everyone here to go home with the story of how you were dumped, or do you want to give them something entirely different to talk about? Her father stepped forward, his brow deeply furrowed. Who are you? What the hell is going on? Sebastian released Avery's hand, just enough to politely extend his own to George. Sebastian Pierce. I'm an architect, Avery's boss at the firm, and the man marrying your daughter today. A collective gasp rang out loud enough to pierce the eardrums. Diane staggered and grabbed her sister's arm for support. George stared at Sebastian as if the man had just announced he was an alien. An uproar erupted from all sides, a chaotic whirlwind of shock, confusion, and disbelief. What kind of crazy nonsense is this? Her dad barked. But Sebastian was already ignoring the utter bedlam he had caused, turning his full attention back to Avery. He waited patiently, his hand extended and open. An invitation, an escape hatch, a decision that would change everything. The choice is yours, Avery, he repeated, but decide right now. Avery looked at his extended hand. She looked at her father, red-faced with anger and confusion. She looked at her mother, weeping uncontrollably. She looked at the guests, holding their smartphones high, waiting for the next chapter of the scandal. And she looked at Zoe, whose eyes were wide as saucers, completely lost as to what to do. And then, through the noise, she heard her uncle's voice again. Does this guy think he's Superman or something? This is going to be quite the show. More laughter, more mockery, more humiliation. Avery clenched her jaw, lifted her chin, and grasped Sebastian's hand with such force she could feel her fingernails digging into his skin. Let's do this, she said, her voice sounding firmer than it had at any point in the last 3 hours. Sebastian nodded, a nearly imperceptible smile gracing the corner of his mouth. Then he turned to the officiant, who was still standing by the altar, looking utterly bewildered. Sir, may we proceed with the ceremony? As I mentioned, I apologize for the delay, but we had some issues with the traffic. The officiant blinked rapidly, looking between Sebastian, Avery, George, and back to Sebastian. I need to verify the paperwork. The marriage license identification from the groom and the witnesses. Everything is prepared right here, Sebastian said, reaching into the inner breast pocket of his suit jacket and pulling out a slim leather wallet and perfectly folded documents. My ID and the required legal paperwork. The witnesses who were already designated can remain the same. Is there a problem? The officiant took the documents with trembling hands and reviewed them with professional scrutiny. Taking advantage of the momentary distraction, Avery leaned close to Sebastian and whispered through gritted teeth. Who brings an emergency marriage license and paperwork to a wedding? Who does that? Someone who prepares for every possible contingency, he replied, maintaining absolute composure and not even looking her way. This is insane. We can't actually get married. You're my boss. This makes no sense. It makes perfect sense, Sebastian countered, finally turning to face her. Unless you'd prefer to watch your father fly to Cabo, attempt to murder Jason, and end up in a federal penitentiary, trust me, he will find him. And you know George's temper. It won't end well. Avery glanced over at her father, his face still contorted in rage, his fists still clenched as he muttered threats while staring at his phone. Sebastian was right. Her dad was exactly the kind of man to hop on the first flight to Mexico and do something insane he would regret for the rest of his life. The documents are in order, the officiant announced, his tone still hesitant, but I must inform you that this is a legally binding act. Once you sign and we file this with the city clerk, you will be legally married under the laws of the state of New York. Do you really wish to proceed? Sebastian looked at Avery. She felt the weight of his gaze, the unspoken question within it. She could still back out. She could say no, swallow the humiliation, and let everyone go home with their versions of the story. Or she could do this wildly illogical, insane thing that in some twisted way made perfect sense. We will proceed. The answer slipped out of Avery's mouth before her brain could stop it. The officiant nodded slowly. Very well. Then let us begin the ceremony. He turned to the guests, cleared his throat, and spoke in his professional voice. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to begin the wedding ceremony for Avery Parker and Sebastian Pierce. We ask for your silence and respect during the proceedings. The murmuring didn't stop entirely, but it died down to a manageable hum. People's phone cameras were still pointed at the altar. Faces were still painted with disbelief, but at least they had stopped shouting. Sebastian guided Avery toward the altar with measured, careful steps, his hand resting firmly on the small of her back, a protective gesture that sent a jolt of electricity down her spine. Are you all right? He asked in a low voice as they stood before the officiant. No, Avery replied with brutal honesty. Nothing about this situation is all right. I know, but we're going to make it look like it is. The officiant began reciting the standard script. Avery barely processed the words. Her mind was still spinning dizzyingly, trying to comprehend how she had gone from a bride waiting for Jason to standing at the altar with her boss, a man with whom she had exchanged exactly 3 personal conversations in the 3 years. They had worked together. Do you, Sebastian Pierce, take Avery Parker to be your lawfully wedded wife, promising to love and cherish her for the rest of your days? I do, Sebastian answered without a fraction of hesitation, looking straight into her eyes. Avery's heart plummeted. This is real. This is actually happening. Do you, Avery Parker, take Sebastian Pierce to be your lawfully wedded husband, promising to love and respect him for the rest of your days? Avery opened her mouth. The words caught in her throat. Everyone was waiting. Sebastian was looking at her with a magnetic intensity that made it impossible to look away. Her dad was still scowling, her mom was still crying, and Zoe was biting her nails. The guests held their collective breath. I do, she finally whispered the 2 short words, feeling like a final verdict. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the officiant declared. You may kiss the bride. Avery panicked. That wasn't part of the plan. Well, none of this was part of the plan, but they had absolutely never discussed a kiss. Sebastian must have read the sheer terror on her face, because he leaned in just slightly and merely brushed his lips against hers. It was a brief, chaste contact, barely worthy of being called a kiss, but it was enough to trigger a storm of applause, whistles, cheers, and camera flashes. It's over, Sebastian muttered near her ear. Now smile and breathe. The worst part is behind us. But as Avery turned to face the guests hand in hand with Sebastian forcing a bright smile, she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst part was only just beginning. As the applause echoed like distant thunder, Avery tried to process what she had just done. She was married. Married to Sebastian Pierce. Her boss, a man she knew almost nothing about outside of boardroom meetings and professional emails until 3 hours ago. His hand was still firmly holding hers, anchoring her to a reality that felt entirely surreal. "Congratulations, sweetheart," Avery's mother stumbled over, dabbing away her smudged mascara with a soggy tissue. "Welcome to the family, Sebastian." We, Diane's voice cracked before she could finish the sentence. Sebastian bowed his head politely, briefly letting go of Avery's hand to give her mother a gentle hug. "I am truly sorry for the confusion, Diane. Things happened very abruptly between us. It was never my intention to cause you worry." Worry George appeared from behind his wife. His face was still red, but his fury had morphed into utter bewilderment. "You owe me an explanation, son. 5 minutes ago, my daughter was engaged to another man, and suddenly—" "Dad, please," Avery interrupted, feeling a wave of panic rising in her throat. "Not right now. We have 200 people waiting. Let's talk later." Her father looked at her as if she were a total stranger. And perhaps she was. The Avery he knew would never have done something like this. She wasn't the type to make impulsive, irrational decisions that went completely against her usual character. But that Avery hadn't been abandoned at the altar on her wedding day in front of her entire family and all her friends. "It's completely understandable that you want answers," George Sebastian intervened calmly, "and I promise to explain everything to you. But as Avery said, right now, we need to attend to the guests. They took the time and effort to be here. It would be rude not to acknowledge their presence." Sebastian's cold rational logic neutralized any possible argument. George clenched his jaw, gave a curt nod, and walked away, muttering something unintelligible. Diane looked between the two of them with tear-filled eyes before following her husband. Avery let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. "Breathe," Sebastian murmured without looking at her, maintaining his polite smile and nodding at the approaching guests. "Keep your composure. In a few hours, this will all be over." And then what Avery whispered through her teeth, forcing a smile as her aunt walked past them with a highly suspicious glare. "And then we find a solution. But right now, I need you to act as if this is exactly what you wanted." Zoe came practically sprinting across the marble floor, the clicking of her heels echoing sharply. "Avery, what the hell just happened? You just married the CEO of your company. Are you out of your mind?" Probably, Avery admitted, feeling a bubble of hysteria rising in her chest. "But it's done, Zoe. I signed. I said I do. It's over." "You must be Zoe," Sebastian interjected, offering his empty hand to Avery's best friend. "I've heard a lot about you. Avery talks about you all the time." Zoe took his hand with a guarded look, studying him carefully as if he were a puzzle she needed to solve. "I don't recall Avery ever mentioning you, not once. We preferred to keep our private lives strictly confidential," Sebastian replied without batting an eye. "Given our professional dynamic, it seemed like the most logical choice." "Logical throwing a surprise wedding in the middle of a disaster is your idea of logical, Zoe, please," Avery pleaded. "Not now." Her friend looked at her with a mix of worry and frustration before letting out a long sigh. "Fine, but you and I are going to have a very long talk after this is over." "Understood." "Understood." Avery was just grateful Zoe wasn't going to cause a scene. The wedding planner approached with her clipboard, looking significantly more relieved than she had 20 minutes ago. "Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Pierce, shall we proceed with the reception? The banquet is ready, the orchestra is awaiting your cue, and the guests are asking about the toasts." Sebastian checked his watch, a Patek Philippe that probably cost more than Avery's car. "Let's proceed. Everything goes according to plan. Perfect. Then I will show everyone to the main dining room." The next 30 minutes were a dizzying blur of smiling faces, forced congratulations, and curious stares. Avery shook countless hands, hugged distant relatives she barely knew, and smiled until her cheeks ached. Sebastian moved expertly by her side, gracefully sidestepping intrusive questions and smoothly steering uncomfortable conversations towards safer topics. "Your husband is incredibly handsome," a distant cousin whispered in her ear. "And clearly loaded. That suit, those shoes, that watch, they probably cost as much as my house." "Yeah," Avery replied mechanically. She had no idea what else to say. "So how did you two meet? I swear just yesterday you told me you were marrying Jason, but things got so complicated." "Excuse me," Avery cut her off. "I think my mom is calling me." She fled before the cousin could press further, taking brief refuge behind a pillar draped in white floral garlands to catch her breath. The corset was still squeezing her ribs. The veil felt like it weighed a ton. Her feet were screaming in agony from the high heels. But the absolute worst part was the exhausting sensation of continuously acting in a play for which no one had given her the script. "Are you okay?" Sebastian's voice made her jump. She hadn't even heard him approach. He handed her a flute of champagne, which she took with trembling fingers. "No," Avery admitted, taking a long, burning sip. "I'm not okay. Nothing about this is okay. I know. But you're doing much better than I expected." "Doing better, Sebastian. I just married you. I don't even know your favorite color. I don't know if you have siblings or where you live. I know absolutely nothing about you except that you're a genius architect and you absolutely despise decaf coffee." A faint smile touched Sebastian's lips. "Navy blue. I have a younger sister living in Paris. I live in a penthouse in Tribeca. And you're right about the decaf. It's an insult to nature." Despite the absurdity of it all, a hysterical laugh bubbled up in Avery's chest. "This is crazy. Completely crazy." "I agree," Sebastian said, "but it's a solvable kind of crazy. Listen, I know this is overwhelming. I know you don't know me, but I promise we will figure this out. We just need to survive today. Let people go home in peace, and tomorrow we'll sit down quietly and have a calm discussion about what to do next." "And what do we do next?" Avery asked, looking him straight in the eye. "A quickie divorce. Pretend to be a happily married couple for a while. What on earth were you thinking when you did this?" Sebastian studied her in a long silence that felt like an eternity. In his dark eyes there was something far deeper than mere pity or a sense of duty, something Avery couldn't quite decipher. "Whatever you need," he finally answered. "I did this for you, Avery. It wasn't out of duty and it wasn't out of pity. It was because bride and groom, if you could please step up to the dais for the toasts," the wedding planner shouted with entirely too much enthusiasm, completely cutting off whatever Sebastian was about to say. Avery wanted to scream at him to wait, that she needed to hear the end of that sentence, but they were already being ushered to the center of the ballroom, where two crystal flutes sat on a beautifully decorated table. The orchestra began playing a romantic melody. The guests gathered in a circle around them. Once again, smartphones were raised, capturing every angle. Sebastian picked up his glass first, turning to the guests before facing Avery. "I want to thank everyone for being here today. I know this situation is highly unconventional, but life rarely goes according to the plans we make. Sometimes it surprises us, and sometimes it gives us exactly what we need when we least expect it." He paused, meeting her eyes with an intensity that stole the breath from her lungs. "Avery, from the day you joined our firm, I knew you were different. Your dedication, your intellect, your ability to solve problems that others couldn't even see. But what's even more remarkable is your kindness. The way you treat everyone with the exact same level of respect regardless of their status. That's not something you can teach. That's simply who you are." Avery felt tears welling up in her eyes. These weren't empty words just for show. There was a genuine ringing conviction in Sebastian's voice. "I don't know what our future holds," he continued. "Nobody does. But there is one thing I am absolutely certain of. I want to face that future with you, so let us raise a glass to the two of us. To unexpected connections, to things that aren't perfect, and to having the courage to take a leap of faith when the ground crumbles beneath your feet." Applause erupted. The guests cheered. Someone yelled, "Kiss, kiss," and soon the room was chanting it like a mantra. Sebastian raised an eyebrow slightly, asking a silent question. Avery gave a tiny nod, expecting another brief brush of the lips like at the altar. But when Sebastian's lips met hers this time, it was neither short nor chaste. It was slow, deliberate, and all-consuming. One of his hands slipped around her waist, pulling her flush against him. His other hand cradled her face with a tenderness that contrasted sharply with the sheer intensity of the kiss. Avery felt the boundaries of the world melting away. The noise faded into a distant hum, and every nerve in her body felt alive for the first time in months. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathless. The guests were going wild with whistles and clapping, but Avery barely heard them. She could only stare at Sebastian, at those dark eyes shining with something that was absolutely not an act. "What was that?" Avery whispered, still in a daze. "A very convincing performance," Sebastian replied, though his voice sounded different too. "That wasn't acting." "No," Sebastian admitted a moment later. "It wasn't." Before Avery could even process that confession, the orchestra began playing the song for their first dance. Keeping his hand firmly on the small of her back, Sebastian led her to the center of the dance floor. The guests stepped back to form a circle, watching the two of them sway to the rhythm of the music. "You know how to dance?" Avery asked, hyper-aware of every point where their bodies touched. "It was a mandatory elective in college," Sebastian answered. "Architecture and ballroom dancing." I know, weird combination, but it comes in handy in moments like this. Like the moment you spontaneously marry your employee. Exactly. It really ought to be part of the core curriculum, Sebastian said smoothly. Avery let out a genuine laugh, surprising even herself. You have a sense of humor. I didn't know. There are a lot of things you don't know about me, Sebastian murmured, elegantly spinning her. But we'll have time to find out. For how long? This can't last forever. Eventually, someone is going to figure it out and— Shh, Sebastian interrupted, pulling her just a fraction closer. Don't think about that right now. Just dance with me. For just this one song, forget about everything else. And Avery did. She closed her eyes, rested her head against Sebastian's shoulder, and let the music envelop them. She decided to forget that just hours ago she had been waiting for another man. She decided to forget that this whole thing was a grand, desperate charade. She even decided to forget that eventually she'd have to face the consequences of this impulsive choice. For that one song for 3 minutes and 40 seconds, she let herself believe that all of this was real. By the time the last guest departed, the New York night had deepened. Avery stood by the ballroom window, watching the taillights of cars fade away down Park Avenue, realizing that the moment she had been pushing off for 6 hours had finally arrived. There was no more need to act, no more forced smiles, no more superficial conversations. It was just her Sebastian Pierce, and a reality neither of them knew how to navigate. Should we call your family? Sebastian's voice broke the silence from behind her. Your father left pretty angry. It might be better to clear the air tonight. Avery shook her head without turning around. No, I don't have the energy to face any more conflict tonight. Sebastian's footsteps approached and his reflection appeared in the glass. He stood less than 3 feet away. He had taken off his suit jacket and loosened his tie. The sleeves of his crisp white shirt were rolled up, revealing forearms that were surprisingly tanned and muscular for a man who spent his days behind a desk. Avery felt a sudden uncomfortable heat rising in her neck and quickly looked away. I booked the bridal suite here at the Waldorf, Sebastian said. The wedding planner strongly recommended it. Apparently it was included in the package your father paid for. The bridal suite, of course. The perfect capstone to this disaster was sharing a romantic room with a man who was technically her husband, but essentially a stranger. If you're uncomfortable, I can get another room, Sebastian quickly added, reading her unease. Actually, that would be best. I don't want you to feel pressured. No, Avery said, stopping him, surprising herself. We've provided enough of a spectacle for one day. If any of the hotel staff sees us taking separate rooms on our wedding night, the rumor mill will be running wild by tomorrow morning. Sebastian nodded slowly. Then we'll use the suite. I'll take the couch. You're 6'2". You're not going to fit on any couch. I've slept in far worse places working on construction sites. I'll be fine. The tension between them was palpable, like a live wire ready to snap. Avery finally turned to face him, crossing her arms. This wedding dress suddenly felt incredibly ridiculous. It felt like an elaborate costume for a fantasy that didn't exist. Why did you do it? She needed to hear the rest of his answer from earlier. Don't tell me it was out of pity or duty. Nobody gets married for those reasons. Sebastian stared at her for a long time. His dark eyes scanned her face as if he were searching for the right words in a language he hadn't fully mastered. Finally, he ran a hand through his hair, messing up the perfect style he had maintained all day, and let out a sigh. Because I couldn't stand there and watch them tear you apart, he admitted. I heard their whispers, their laughter, all that sick curiosity. And when you came out of that holding room, I saw your face. I saw you desperately trying to hold yourself together while your world collapsed, and I just couldn't. I couldn't bear it. But that doesn't explain why you decided to marry me. You could have done 1,000 other things. You could have pulled me out of there, canceled the wedding for me, helped me run away. I didn't have to marry you, Sebastian finished for her. You're right. I didn't have to. Then why? Because in that moment it felt like the only solution that fixed everything at once. Your father was about to do something he'd regret for the rest of his life, and your family would have had to endure that humiliation for weeks, maybe months. The guests would have gone home with gossip that would follow you around for years. And you would have blamed yourself for all of it, even though none of it was your fault. Avery felt the tears she had been holding back all day finally spill over. She tried to wipe them away quickly, but Sebastian took a step closer, pulled a pristine handkerchief from his pocket, and handed it to her. Don't cry, he murmured, his voice softer than anything she had ever heard from him at the office. You've already shed enough tears for a man who doesn't deserve them. So what do we do now? Avery asked, her voice cracking. What happens to this marriage? Do we sign divorce papers next week? Do we play house for a while? How are we supposed to just go back to the office and act like nothing happened? To be completely honest, I don't know, Sebastian confessed. I had no plan beyond getting you through today. I only knew that I had to help you in that moment. That's very noble of you. But marriages aren't sustained by nobility. They're sustained by love. Sebastian's expression shifted, and the tone of his voice forced Avery to look right at him. Right. Love. And we don't love each other. We barely know each other. Sebastian took another step, closing the distance between them to mere inches. Avery had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, her heartbeat accelerating wildly, hyper-aware of every breath she took. Want to know a secret, he asked, his voice dropping to a near whisper. That kiss on the dance floor, that wasn't acting, and I think you felt it too. Avery opened her mouth to deny it, but the words died in her throat. Because he was right. She had felt it. In that moment when everything else faded away and it was just the two of them moving to the music, there was a connection between them that defied all logic. That doesn't mean anything, she managed to say. It was just adrenaline, because that's exactly what it is, Avery. Chemistry. You can't fake it and you can't force it. It's either there or it isn't. Are you crazy? She mumbled, taking a step back. This is insane. 12 hours ago, you were just my boss. Now you're my husband talking about chemistry and you're afraid. Sebastian cut in. I get it. I'm afraid too, but that doesn't change the fact that there is something between us. Something worth exploring. Exploring. Avery let out a hysterical laugh. Sebastian, we aren't teenagers experimenting with puppy love. We're adults who made a wildly impulsive decision and now we have to deal with the consequences. Exactly, he agreed. We're adults. So, let's act like adults. Let's be honest about what we want. And what is it that you want? The question hung in the air between them like an unexploded bomb. Sebastian looked at her with that inescapable intensity, a gaze that seemed to pierce straight through the defensive walls Avery had meticulously built up all day. I want to give you time, he finally answered. Time to process what happened with Jason. Time to get to know the real me outside of the boss-employee dynamic. Time to decide for yourself what you want to do with this marriage without any pressure or obligations. And during that time, we live our lives. We go about our days. I won't ask anything of you. I won't push you into anything you're not ready for. But I also won't hide how I feel. Avery could feel her heart pounding dangerously fast. And how do you feel? Sebastian stepped closer again. He was so close now that Avery could feel the heat radiating from his body, his subtle cologne mixed with a deeper masculine scent that hovered near her nose. I feel like that kiss was the most real thing I've experienced in years, he murmured. I feel like every morning when I see you in the office, my day instantly gets better. I feel like I want to hear that genuine laugh of yours, the one you let out when you think no one is listening every single day. And I feel that what I did today wasn't just to save you from humiliation. I did it because I couldn't stand the thought of another man hurting you. The silence that followed was deafening. Avery could hear her own ragged breathing. Every word Sebastian spoke lodged deep in her chest, settling firmly in a place she had kept locked away during the long months she was engaged to Jason. I can't process all of this right now, she finally whispered. It's too much. It's all just too much. I know. Sebastian stepped back, giving her space. That's why I'm suggesting we just rest tonight. Tomorrow, with clear heads, we can figure out how to untangle all of this. Avery nodded, deeply grateful for the temporary truce. Sebastian walked over to the door where the bellhop had left their luggage. He set Avery's suitcase near the bathroom. Take a shower, change into something comfortable, and rest. I'll wait out here. Sebastian. When he grabbed the door handle, Avery stopped him. Thank you for everything today, for saving me. He turned back and the smile he gave her was entirely different from the professional mask she had seen for 3 years at the office. It was warm, genuine, and tender. I didn't save you, Avery. I just reminded you that you are strong enough to save yourself. As he walked out and closed the door, Avery collapsed onto the edge of the king-size bed, which was strewn with rose petals. She picked up a petal, feeling its soft, fragile texture. This entire suite was decorated for the romantic wedding night she was supposed to share with Jason. Scented candles, champagne, heart-shaped chocolates on the pillows. But Jason was in Cabo, probably drunk in some bar, celebrating his successful escape. And she was here. Married to a man who had just confessed he had feelings for her. A man who seemed to know her far better than she realized. A man who had risked everything to protect her from the worst humiliation of her life. Avery stared at her reflection in the vanity mirror. Her makeup was smudged, her hair was a mess, and the dress was deeply wrinkled. She felt as though she had been completely shattered and reassembled, broken, but put back together with a material entirely different and much stronger than before. She slowly unzipped the wedding dress, letting the mass of satin and lace pool around her feet on the floor. She stared at it for a long time before kicking it into the corner of the room. Tomorrow she would have to explain all her choices and face the consequences. Tomorrow she would face her family, discuss plans with Sebastian, and decipher what all of this really meant. But tonight, just for a few hours, she wanted to close her eyes and pretend the world was turning normally. The scalding hot water from the shower head hit her back with agonizing force, but it was exactly the shock she needed. As the marble bathroom filled with steam, she tried to mentally organize the events of the last 12 hours. 12 hours. That was all it took for her entire world to flip upside down. Resting her hands against the cold tile, she closed her eyes and the memories flooded in unfiltered Jason's escape. The cruel whispers of the guests, Sebastian appearing like a miracle, the kiss at the altar, the toast, the first dance, and the conversation in the suite. His words which had ignited an emotion she couldn't quite name. "I feel like that kiss was the most real thing I've experienced in years." His voice echoed in her ears. How could a man who barely knew her pinpoint exactly what she needed to hear, and why did her body react so intensely every time he came near? Good God, he was her boss. The handsome, brilliant, hyper-competent CEO, and a man who had apparently been watching her hiding his feelings for 3 solid years. Avery turned off the water, stepped out of the shower, and wrapped herself in a fluffy white towel. She rummaged through her suitcase. Instead of the scandalous lingerie she had packed for her honeymoon, she found a comfortable cotton pajama set that Zoe must have packed for her, mentally sending her friend a wave of profound gratitude. It wasn't seductive in the least, which perfectly fit the awkwardness of the current situation. When she stepped out of the bathroom, Sebastian was standing by the window, looking out over the glittering New York City skyline. He had changed into a gray t-shirt and sweatpants. Stripped of his tailored suit, he looked younger, more approachable. He looked less like a billionaire architect and more like a normal guy trying to make sense of an abnormal situation. Feeling better, he asked, not turning around, as if he sensed her presence. "I'm cleaner at least," Avery replied, running a hand through her damp hair. "I'm not sure better is the right word, though." Sebastian finally turned, and Avery noticed the deep lines of exhaustion around his eyes. It had been an incredibly long day for both of them. He pointed to a room service cart he had ordered while she was showering. 2 plates of pasta, a salad, warm bread, and a bottle of red wine. "I figured you'd be hungry. You didn't eat a thing during the reception." At his words, Avery's stomach let out a loud rumble. He was right. She had been too busy acting the part of the happy bride to swallow even a sip of water since breakfast, which felt like a lifetime ago. "Thank you," she muttered, sitting down in an armchair near the table. "You really didn't have to go out of your way." "Of course I did," Sebastian said, sitting across from her and pouring 2 glasses of wine. "You need to eat, and I need food in my stomach to process everything that's happened." For the first few minutes, they ate in total silence. Surprisingly, it wasn't uncomfortable. Instead, there was a sense of camaraderie. It felt like they were soldiers who had survived a fierce battle together, earning the right to simply exist in each other's space without needing to fill every second with chatter. "What are you planning to tell your parents tomorrow?" Sebastian finally asked, setting down his fork. "Your father practically demanded an explanation immediately." Avery took a long sip of wine and sighed. "The truth, or at least a version of it, that Jason ran off, that you stepped in to help me, and things just got out of hand. It was the issue that had been torturing her since the moment she signed the papers. But seriously, what do? We can't just keep working together like nothing happened. The entire company is going to know." "They probably already do," Sebastian pointed out. "Social media moves fast. By tomorrow morning, everyone at the firm will have heard at least 3 different variations of what happened today." Avery felt nauseous. She hadn't fully thought that far ahead. Her coworkers, clients, vendors, everyone would know that she married her boss on the very day she was dumped at the altar. The speculation would be ruthless. "Avery." Sebastian's voice pulled her out of her spiral of panic. "Look at me." She obeyed, meeting his dark eyes, which were filled with genuine concern. "We are going to handle this together," he continued. "If anyone whispers behind your back, tell them to say it to my face. And if anyone disrespects you or treats you poorly, they will have to deal with me." "Understood." The fierce protectiveness in his voice shook Avery to her core. Jason had never defended her like that. He had never fought for her. Whenever there was an issue, it was always Avery's job to smooth things over, apologize for things that weren't her fault, and keep the peace. Why are you going this far? She asked softly. Why do you care so much about me? Sebastian set down his wine glass and leaned forward, closing the space between them. Because for the last 3 years I've watched you give your absolute all to our firm. I've seen you arrive earlier than anyone else and leave later. I've watched you quietly solve problems that weren't even your responsibility. I've seen your smile, even when you must have been exhausted and frustrated. And I saw you with Jason. Avery blinked in surprise. Yes. When he came to pick you up at the office a few times, I saw how he spoke to you not like a partner but like a personal assistant. I saw him treat your accomplishments as trivial compared to his. And every time you were with him, I saw you shrink yourself. As if you had to make yourself as small as possible so he could shine brighter. His words hit Avery right in the chest. Because they were true. Every single word was the absolute truth. The fact that Sebastian had noticed things she had only just barely begun to admit to herself was devastating. I loved him, she whispered, though the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. Did you love him, or did you love the role you felt you had to play? Sebastian asked gently. As an outsider looking in Avery, it didn't look like love. It looked like inertia. It looked like a fear of being alone. It looked like it was easier for you to settle for less than you deserved rather than admit you were with the wrong man. Avery felt the tears rising again, but this time they weren't tears of humiliation or grief. They were tears of validation. The truth her subconscious had been screaming at her for months had finally been spoken aloud by someone else. He made me feel pathetic, she admitted in a fragile whisper. He made me feel smaller and smaller, and I just let him, because I was afraid that if I asked for more, I'd end up with nothing. Sebastian stood up from his chair, knelt on one knee in front of her, and wrapped both of his hands around hers. The gesture was so unexpected, so tender, that Avery couldn't look away. He looked at her as if she were something incredibly precious, something that had to be protected at all costs. Listen to me very carefully, Avery Parker, he said, his voice so intense it stole her breath. You are not pathetic. You are brilliant, talented, and capable of achieving things most people couldn't even imagine. And a man who doesn't see that, a man who doesn't celebrate that every single day doesn't deserve a second of your time. I know this situation is incredibly complicated. Your life just blew up and the last thing you need right now is more pressure. But I need you to know this. When I look at you, I don't see my employee. I don't see an assistant. I see a beautiful, extraordinary woman who deserves to be loved exactly as she is, without having to shrink herself for anyone. Avery could feel her heart pounding so hard she thought Sebastian could hear it. The defensive walls she had carefully maintained all night began to crack and crumble, revealing the vulnerable, frightened woman underneath. I don't know what to do, she confessed. I don't know how to be your wife. I don't know how to let you into my life. I'm so scared. Scared of what he asked when she hesitated. That this is all too good to be true. That I'll wake up tomorrow and realize you were just acting out of pity. That when you really get to know me, when you see all my flaws and insecurities, you'll realize I'm not worth all the risks you took. That terrifies me. Sebastian let go with one hand, reaching up to gently wipe a stray tear from her cheek with his thumb. Do you know what I see when I look at you? I see someone who shows up and gives her best every day, even when no one is watching. I see someone who treats the janitorial staff with the exact same respect she gives our billionaire clients. I see someone who stays until 2 a.m. to help a coworker struggling with a project that isn't even hers. I see immense strength disguised as kindness. I see brilliance mixed with humility. And I see your flaws and insecurities too, because you're human. But they don't make you any less extraordinary. If anything, they make you more real. It was impossible to tell who moved first. Perhaps they were simultaneously pulled by an undeniable magnetic gravity. Before Avery knew it, Sebastian's lips were on hers. And this kiss was different. It wasn't for an audience and it wasn't an act. It was hunger, it was longing, and it was something infinitely more dangerous. Sebastian's hands tangled in her damp hair, pulling her flush against him. Avery responded with equal fervor, channeling all the pain and chaos of the day into a physical connection that words couldn't express. They stumbled against the table, laughing, as they awkwardly made their way toward the bed without breaking the kiss. Sebastian gently laid her back against the mattress, bracing his weight on his arms on either side of her head. His eyes searched hers, filled with a silent question. He was giving her an out space to step back if that was what she wanted. Are you sure? His voice was rough, almost gravelly. We can stop right here. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. Avery looked up at him, at the man who had come out of nowhere and completely altered her universe. The man who saw her, truly saw her in a way no one ever had, and she made her decision. I'm sure, she whispered, pulling him down to her. For the first time in a very long time, I am absolutely sure. And as their bodies pressed together, as every touch awakened nerve endings Avery had long forgotten she possessed, as whispers turned into sighs and hands grew desperate, she knew she had crossed a line there was no coming back from. This was no longer a play. It wasn't a lie. It was real, tangible, all-consuming emotion. And for the first time since she had woken up that morning, believing she was going to marry the wrong man, Avery felt exactly where she was supposed to be. When the morning sunlight filtered through the curtains of the suite, Avery woke up wrapped in warmth and the scent of the man beside her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Sebastian was sleeping, his arm wrapped protectively around her waist. His relaxed face looked softer, his slightly parted lips radiating absolute peace. Avery studied him quietly, letting the magnitude of what had just happened wash over her. 24 hours ago, she was getting ready to marry a man completely oblivious to the fact that it was a terrible mistake. But now she was lying naked under the sheets with a man who had been virtually a stranger yesterday but who now seemed to know her better than anyone else in the world. Sebastian's phone vibrated on the nightstand, breaking the morning silence. He shifted, tightened his grip around her waist, and opened his eyes. Catching her looking at him, a slow, devastating smile spread across his face. "Good morning," he whispered, his voice thick with sleep. "Good morning," Avery replied, feeling her cheeks flush as the vivid memories of the previous night came rushing back. Sebastian grabbed his phone and furrowed his brow as he looked at the screen. 32 messages, 15 missed calls. This is going to be interesting. From who? Mostly your parents. A few from the office. And apparently my sister in Paris heard the news and is demanding an immediate explanation. Avery buried her face in the pillow and groaned. "I don't want to deal with any of this yet. Can't we just lock ourselves in here forever and pretend the outside world doesn't exist?" Sebastian's deep laughter vibrated against her chest. "I'd love nothing more, but eventually we have to face the music. At the very least, I should probably text your dad back before he comes down here and breaks down the hotel door." As soon as he said that, Avery's own phone began to ring. The caller ID flashed Mom. Avery looked at Sebastian in sheer panic. "Answer it," he urged gently. "The longer you wait, the worse it's going to get." Avery took a deep breath and answered, "Mom." "Avery Parker, where are you? Are you okay? Your father and I have been up all night trying to figure out what on earth happened yesterday. How did you end up marrying your boss?" "Mom, calm down. I'm fine. I'm at the hotel in the suite with Sebastian, with Mr. Pierce." A deafening silence echoed through the receiver. When Diane finally spoke, her voice was rigidly controlled. "You are in the suite with Sebastian Pierce. We're married, Mom. Technically, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Cut the technicalities, young lady. Yesterday you were supposed to marry Jason, and today you're waking up with a completely different man. How are we supposed to process this?" Avery felt Sebastian's hand slide gently onto her thigh, offering silent support. That simple touch gave her the courage to keep speaking. "Jason abandoned me, Mom. He knew I was waiting at the altar and he got on a plane anyway. Sebastian stepped in when I needed him the most. And yes, I know this all happened incredibly fast, but it was my choice. Nobody forced me. So what are you going to do now? Keep up this insane charade, or are you going to get a divorce like normal people do after an impulsive Vegas-style stunt?" The question hung heavily in the air. Avery looked at Sebastian, trying to read his thoughts, but his dark eyes were merely reflecting the same question back at her. "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know, Mom," Avery admitted honestly. "We're still figuring this out ourselves. But I promise you this wasn't just a fake show, and it wasn't a decision made lightly." Diane let out a deep sigh. "Your father wants to see the two of you today. He says if this man is really going to be your husband, he needs to get to know him properly, not just as an emergency stand-in." "Okay, I'll tell Sebastian. Where should we meet?" "Come to the house in Greenwich. By noon. And Avery." Diane's voice softened slightly. "I just want to know that you're okay. That this is really what you want." Avery looked back at Sebastian, the man who had swept into her life like a hurricane and changed everything. The man who, instead of watching her crumble and walking away, chose to hold her up. The man who had made her feel more in a single night than Jason had in 2 years. "I'm okay, Mom," Avery answered, her voice ringing with a certainty that surprised even her. "For the first time in a long time, I'm more than okay." By the time she hung up, Sebastian was already sitting up in bed, looking serious as he scrolled through his messages. Avery took the opportunity to unabashedly admire him. The morning light danced across the muscles of his back, a physique that clearly hadn't been built by sitting at a desk all day. "What is it?" he asked without turning around, though there was already a smile in his voice. "Nothing. Just wondering how I worked for you for 3 years and never noticed you were in such good shape." Sebastian raised an eyebrow and turned to face her. "In good shape. After last night, that's the best compliment you can give me." Avery laughed and threw a pillow at him, which he caught effortlessly. "You are impossible," Sebastian said, his tone turning devastatingly sincere, making her heart skip a beat. "And incredibly beautiful, especially in the morning with your hair a mess, trying desperately to hide that smile." The atmosphere shifted back to the charged intimacy that had exploded between them the night before. Sebastian set his phone down, leaned in, and captured her lips in a slow, deep kiss. A kiss that promised so much more. "We have to go see my parents," Avery murmured against his lips when they finally broke apart. "They're going to interrogate us with 100 questions. I'm ready. Your dad will probably threaten me." "It wouldn't be the first time I've dealt with that," Sebastian replied easily. Avery pulled back slightly, looking at him seriously. "Sebastian, this is a big deal. My parents are going to want to know what we are, what our plans are, whether this is real or just temporary. And I don't know how to answer them." Sebastian cupped her face with both hands, holding her gaze. "Then we answer with the truth together." "And what is the truth?" "That this started as an impulse to save you from a terrible situation, but as the night went on, it became real. It became something I want to explore, something worth fighting for." "What if it doesn't work out?" Avery asked quietly. "What if in a month or two we realize this was all just an adrenaline rush? What if we ruin the stable boss-employee dynamic we had before chasing a fantasy that won't last?" "But what if it does work out?" Sebastian countered. "What if this is exactly what we both needed, and we were just too blind or too scared to see it before? Wouldn't walking away from this chance because of fear be the real mistake?" Avery closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision. She could run away right now. She could demand an annulment, pretend none of this ever happened, and go back to the safe, predictable routine of being his employee. Her rational brain was screaming that it was the logical choice, but her traitorous heart, which had been asleep for so long and was now fully awake, was saying something else entirely. "I want to try," she whispered, opening her eyes to meet his intense stare. "I want to see where this goes, but you have to promise to be honest with me. If you ever change your mind or if you regret this, you have to tell me. I can't survive being abandoned again." The pain that flashed across Sebastian's face was visceral. "Avery, look at me. Look right at me. I am not Jason. I do not run away when things get complicated. I don't make you small so I can feel big. And I will never, ever abandon you just because I'm scared of my own feelings." "Then what are you feeling, Sebastian?" He smiled, that slow, devastating smile that sent Avery's heart rate soaring. "I'm still figuring it out. But I know that every time I look at you, my chest tightens. I know your laugh is my favorite sound, and knowing I'll get to see you is the only reason I look forward to waking up. And I know that what happened last night is just the beginning of something much, much bigger." Avery felt tears pricking her eyes, but this time they were tears of relief and hope. The overwhelming realization of being chosen without any conditions. "I need a shower," she announced, trying to lighten the mood before she completely broke down. "And coffee. So much coffee." "Do you need company in the shower?" Sebastian asked, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Absolutely not. If you come in there, we'll never leave this suite, and my parents will literally file a missing persons report." Sebastian laughed and let her go with one last kiss. "All right. I'll order breakfast from room service. What do you want, guess?" As Avery disappeared into the bathroom, Sebastian picked up his phone to deal with his sister Serena's increasingly frantic messages. Bracing himself for an inevitable interrogation, he initiated a video call. Serena's face popped onto the screen, looking half exasperated and half furious. "Sebastian Pierce, have you lost your mind? You get married and you don't even tell me. Morning, Serena." "Don't morning me. Explain yourself right now." "I saw the pictures on Instagram." "Who is she? Everyone is saying the groom bolted and you threw a surprise wedding." "What is going on?" Sebastian ran a hand through his hair and sighed. "It's complicated. I have time. Mom is completely freaking out and booked a flight to New York for tomorrow. You better have a damn good excuse." "Of course she did," Sebastian muttered. "Long story short, Avery works for my firm. Her fiancé bailed on the wedding day and I stepped in. So we got married. And as it turns out, this might actually be something real. Something I'm seriously going to pursue." Serena stared at him for a long moment before bursting into laughter. "Only you would do something this insane, Seb. Seriously, it's so on brand for you. It wasn't exactly planned. Tell me the truth." Is there actually something there, or is this just your white knight complex acting up? Sebastian thought back to everything that had happened the night before. The whispered confessions in the dark, the touches, the kisses. Waking up with Avery in his arms, feeling that perfect sense of everything finally falling into place after years of being slightly off-center. There's something, he admitted. Something massive. Serena's smile softened. Then protect it. Don't worry about what anyone else says. If she's special and if this is real, don't let her go. I have no intention of letting her go. Good. Put her on the phone later. I need to make a good impression before Mom gets to New York and scares my new sister-in-law away with her overbearing energy. Sebastian chuckled. She's in the shower, but I'll introduce you soon. And Serena, thanks. For what? For not judging you. And for believing me. Always, Seb. The Parker family home in Greenwich, Connecticut looked exactly as it had during Avery's childhood, cozy, filled with plants and smelling of freshly brewed coffee. But as Sebastian parked his Mercedes in the driveway, Avery felt like she was walking into a war zone. Ready? Sebastian asked, turning off the engine and looking at her. No, Avery answered honestly, but we can't avoid it. Sebastian took her hand, interlacing their fingers with an ease that still surprised her. Remember, we're a team. Whatever happens in there, we face it together. Those words gave her the exact dose of courage she needed. They walked up to the front door where Diane was waiting with an unreadable expression. Her face softened just a fraction when she saw their clasped hands. Come in, her mother said, simply stepping aside. In the living room, her dad George sat in his armchair, arms crossed and scowling a look Avery knew all too well. Surprisingly, Zoe was also there, sitting on the sofa and giving Avery an encouraging smile. Sit, her dad commanded, pointing to the couch opposite him. Sebastian waited for Avery to sit first before sitting beside her, never letting go of her hand. George's piercing glare zeroed in on their clasped hands with an almost physical weight. All right, her dad began. Who wants to explain the absolute insanity that happened yesterday? As far as I knew, my daughter was marrying someone else. Then he disappears and suddenly you, he pointed a finger at Sebastian, show up and marry my daughter. How does this make any sense? Sebastian leaned forward slightly, maintaining his grip on Avery's hand. You're right, George. To an outsider, it makes no sense. It looks impulsive, irrational, and irresponsible. But if you'll allow me, I'd like to explain exactly why I made that decision. George waved his hand. I'm listening. Avery and I have worked together for 3 years, Sebastian started. During that time, I've watched her grow into one of the best professionals I know. But more importantly, I've seen the kind of person she is. Her dedication, her integrity, the way she treats everyone with respect, regardless of their title. And on the few occasions Jason came by the office, I saw the two of them together. At the mention of Jason's name, George's jaw noticeably tightened. Whenever I saw them together, Sebastian continued, I couldn't understand why such an extraordinary woman was settling for a deadbeat who didn't value her. A guy who treated her like an accessory and constantly belittled her just to make himself look better. Avery's eyes welled with tears, hearing those words spoken aloud in front of her family. Yesterday, when I saw what was happening, when I heard the guests whispering and saw the humiliation on Avery's face, I had 2 choices. Sebastian looked George straight in the eye. I could stand by and do nothing, letting the situation utterly destroy your daughter in front of everyone. Or I could step in and do something about it. And marrying her was the only option. And was it really the only option? Diane asked from her spot by the window. In that moment, it felt like the only solution that fixed everything at once, Sebastian admitted. But I didn't do it just for Avery. I was selfish too. I've wanted to confess my feelings to her for months, maybe years, but I never had the courage. Yesterday gave me the perfect opportunity to prove my feelings to her, even if the method was wildly unconventional. The silence that followed was so heavy you could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Her dad was staring at Avery with an indecipherable expression. Her mom had a hand pressed to her chest and Zoe was beaming. Dad, Avery finally spoke up, her voice trembling but firm. I know this is incredibly hard to accept. I'm still trying to process it myself. But you need to know something. What happened yesterday wasn't a show. It wasn't out of pity. It was the first time in years that someone truly saw me. He saw my flaws, my insecurities, and decided that I was worth the risk. He chose me, Dad. George closed his eyes and let out a deep, long breath. When he opened them again, the look in his eyes was different, softer somehow. Jason, that worthless piece of trash called me this morning, he announced, making everyone in the room tense up. He was crying drunk out of his mind in Cabo, saying he made a terrible mistake. that he got scared and he wanted to come back and fix everything. Avery felt Sebastian's hand instinctively tighten around hers, but she kept her eyes locked on her father. "And what did you say to him?" A slow, almost predatory smile spread across George's face. "I told him it was too late. I told him my daughter had already married a real man, a man who had the guts to show up when he ran away. And I warned him that if he ever came anywhere near my daughter again, he'd be dealing with me." A tearful laugh escaped Avery's lips. Sebastian visibly relaxed, smiling as well. "But that doesn't mean this situation is completely fine," her dad continued, turning his attention back to Sebastian. "You are my daughter's boss. There's a power dynamic there, and that worries me. How can I be sure she isn't feeling pressured? How do I know she's free to make her own choices? I will resign," Sebastian said without a second's hesitation. Everyone in the room, including Avery, stared at him in shock. What Avery asked. "You can't resign as CEO of your own company." "I won't step down from the firm," Sebastian clarified. "I'll step down as your direct supervisor. I'll have the board assign you to another department under a different director. Or better yet, we'll promote you to project manager, which I should have done 6 months ago anyway. That way, you'll run your own team independently and there won't be any conflict of interest or power dynamic issues between us." "Sebastian, you don't have to do that." "Yes, I do," Sebastian interrupted, looking at her with a gaze that stole her breath. "Your father is absolutely right. I never want you to feel trapped in this relationship because of our professional ties. I want you to be with me because you choose to be, not because you feel obligated." Diane walked over and perched on the arm of her husband's chair. "So what are you two going to do about this relationship? Are you just going to have a brief fling until the scandal dies down? Or are you going to live as a real married couple?" Avery looked at Sebastian. She searched his dark eyes, the eyes that had seen right through to her soul, for the answer. He gave her a small smile, squeezed her hand tightly, and met her gaze. "It's real," they both answered at the exact same time, bursting into laughter at the perfect timing. "I don't know exactly what the future holds," Avery said. "I don't know if 6 months from now we'll be as certain as we are today, or if we'll realize this was all crazy. But I know I want to try. When I'm with Sebastian, I feel like I'm valued and celebrated just for being myself. I'm not going to throw that away just because it started out weird." "I love your daughter," Sebastian interjected, the weight of his words filling the room. "It might be too soon to say it. Maybe I should wait. But the truth is, I've been falling in love with her for months without even realizing it. I love her smile when she thinks no one is looking. I love how she treats everyone with dignity. I love the way her mind works when she solves a problem. And yesterday, when I saw her shattered, my only thought was that I would do absolutely anything to take her pain away, including marrying her in front of 200 people without a second thought." Avery felt the tears freely flowing down her cheeks now. Sebastian turned to her and gently wiped them away with his thumb. "I love you, Avery," he repeated. This time, the confession was for her alone. "And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that you are worth every single risk I took." "I love you too," Avery whispered. The moment she said the words out loud, something broken inside her mended together completely. She didn't know exactly when it had happened. Maybe it was yesterday, or maybe it had been a slow, quiet build over the last 3 years. But it was real. They were real. Forgetting they had an audience for a moment, they shared a soft, tender kiss. When they pulled apart, Zoe was clapping through her tears and Diane was dabbing her cheeks with a tissue. Even George was sporting a bright, genuine smile. "All right, fine," her dad finally said. "You have my blessing." But he raised a warning finger. "If you ever make my daughter cry, Sebastian Pierce, I don't care where in the world you hide. I will find you." "I have no intention of making your daughter cry, sir," Sebastian answered earnestly. "My only plan is to spend every day giving her the love she deserves." Diane stood up, wiping her eyes. "Well, since it's done, you need to do things properly. None of this modern, let's just live together and see what happens nonsense. You two are legally married, so you have real work to do. Getting to know each other, building a home, doing things the right way." "Mom, we're already legally married," Avery pointed out. "Legally, yes, but you still need a proper church blessing and a real honeymoon, and Sebastian needs to formally meet the rest of the extended family without all this chaos." Diane let the kids breathe. George chuckled, clearly amused. "Just let them live their lives day by day." Zoe came over and wrapped Avery in a tight hug. "I am so happy for you, Avery," she whispered in her ear. "You deserve this. You deserve all of this love. Thank you for standing by me," Avery replied. "For believing in me when I didn't even know what to believe myself. Always, Av." The next few hours flew by in a blur of coffee conversation and a slow, warm acceptance. George and Sebastian bonded over business talk, finding common ground. Diane bombarded Sebastian with questions about his family and his future plans, and Avery sat back watching it all unfold, feeling the last of her broken pieces perfectly heal. When they finally said their goodbyes and got back into the car, the sun was setting over the New York skyline, painting the clouds in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Sebastian didn't start the engine right away. Instead, he turned to Avery. "Are you okay?" "Better than okay," she answered honestly. "For the first time in a long time, everything feels like it's exactly where it should be. Even the embarrassing part where my former boss swore his eternal love in front of my parents. That was actually the best part," Sebastian smiled. "And strictly speaking, I'm not your boss anymore. Just your husband. Just my husband," Avery repeated, savoring the words. "I really like the sound of that." "Me too." As the sun dipped completely below the city skyline, Sebastian and Avery sealed their promises, born from chaos but solidified in truth with a kiss. They didn't know exactly how their future would unfold. They didn't know if the road ahead would be smooth or rocky, but they were absolutely certain of one thing. The love they had found in each other was worth every risk, worth every moment of uncertainty, and worth laughing off the curious stares of the world in the months to come. Because sometimes the greatest stories begin in the most unexpected places. Sometimes love shows up when you least expect it in the most nonsensical way, at the most chaotic time. And sometimes having the courage to say "I do" when your rational brain is screaming no is all you really need. Avery Parker walked down the aisle firmly believing she was about to marry the wrong man. Instead, she ended up marrying the absolute right one. The man who had been waiting in the wings all along, biding his time for the perfect moment to show her that she deserved to be loved exactly as she was. As they drove off toward their future together, their hands firmly clasped and bright smiles on their faces, they both knew that this story was only just beginning, and they were absolutely certain that the days ahead would be nothing short of beautiful.